Hey, yo, what's good, what's good, what's good? Welcome to Reflections of a DJ, the R.O.A.D podcast presented by DJ City and Beat Source. I'm one of your hosts, DJ Crooked. We got Brooklyn's beloved here, DJ Goldfinger in the building.
Yo, what up, world?
And we have invaded the Sound Collective. Rest in peace to DJ Never, Never Forever.
We have a very outspoken DJ who's a legend. You know, he's an OG member of the legendary turntablist crew, X-Ecutioners, the X-Men. He dropped an album and had huge singles with the X-Men, Linkin Park in the 2000s.
Various albums, actually.
Various albums.
Yeah, let's make sure we get all the accolades right.
He has his own DJ school, the Brolic Army, and he's very, very vocal about his thoughts on the craft of DJing. You've probably seen him on Twitter or Instagram, and he does not waver in his stances on the craft of DJing. You know, there are no shortcuts or fast tracks with our guests. He's written a book, The City of Hip Hop, New York City, the Bronx, and a Peace Meeting. Book was inspired by recent conversations on the history of hip hop, and we're really happy to have him here. We got Rob Swift in the building.
Yeah.
Brolic Arm in the building.
Big ups to Bianca. We got Bianca in the place.
Yes.
All right.
Word.
Yeah. Your publicist.
Yes.
Congratulations on the new book. It just
Thank you.
dropped during the holidays,
Yes, December 18th.
right? December 18th.
Yeah, so
Sagittarius.
about a month ago. Word.
Now, I want to talk about your history with the X-Men and DJing, and but I want to get into this book and the recent conversations that have been coming up and what inspired the book. And I know it happened recently, right? Like,
Well, I'd say circa 2021.
right
after the August 11th anniversary of hip hop. I started noticing a narrative online that was basically excluding races from hip hop that were non-black,
right.
and that just didn't sit well with me, bro.
It was kind of like, I mean, during 2020, you know, there was George Floyd, there was the
pandemic.
pandemic.
Correct.
There was all kinds of things going on. There were protests, BLM protests everywhere. And even on social media, there was a lot of talk, which was necessary talk, on appropriation, the history of a lot of the contributions that black people, specifically black Americans, made to American culture.
Yep.
And I think there were a lot of conversations that surrounded music and white appropriation on black music. I mean, I remember there was a ton of white DJs on Twitter who felt compelled and obligated to announce, I am a white DJ, I play black music, and
it wasn't,
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you,
Yeah, go ahead.
Crooked, but it wasn't just DJs. Bob James,
Right.
a legendary jazz pianist who's been sampled by the likes of Missy Elliott, Run DMC, Rakim, felt compelled to jump online and thank every artist that he worked with. And I was super honored because I was one of the names that came out his mouth. I've collaborated with him.
Right.
But I remember watching him thank every black artist for working with him and thinking, Bob James doesn't have to do that. You know what I mean? Like, why are these amazing talents, DJs, jazz pianists, feeling this like, it's like they're being guilt tripped into thanking one race for their creativity, like they're being allowed to share their talents with the world. That didn't really make sense to me, you know? And it was a crazy year, 2020,
It was
for sure.
I mean, it was undeniably extremely emotional. I think there was, you know, music was not the only thing in question. It was like even fashion designers stealing from black culture. Like everyone was kind of being educated and people felt the obligation to educate. But there was also this kind of, you know how social media is and the internet. There was like an angry mob that was ready to like kind of cancel anyone who was not on board with Black Lives Matter or who wasn't not on board to value black lives, black contributions to, you know, American culture or just on a global scale, right? So I think it was an important time to have these conversations.
Yes.
But there was almost collateral damage, right?
Yeah, I think there still is. I feel that the conversation is helping us think about what we do and who we interact with.
Right.
And I know that when I started to discover this new narrative surrounding hip hop specifically, because I'm not really one about learning who's the latest, fashion designer or any of that. I don't subscribe to that culture. My thing is music and expressing yourself. And so when I discovered these new narratives, that's the important word, because these narratives didn't exist before George Floyd, before the COVID pandemic, at least not in my circles, not with the people that I run with. I felt like, all right, first I need to go online and correct them, because as a teacher of DJing and the greater culture of hip hop, my whole thing was I didn't want my students feeling ostracized or marginalized,
What's good, everyone? This is Neek from Reflections of a DJ, the R.O.A.D podcast. Whether you're just discovering the R.O.A.D podcast or a day one listener, if you've been loving the content or want more, here's your chance to support the pod. Get closer to the action and unlock exclusive content by joining our Patreon. This is for loyal listeners who want early access to new episodes 3 or 4 weeks ahead, your name in the credits of every video episode, and access to our exclusive R.O.A.D edit packs. Now, for the hardcore supporters, we've got our Tier 2 R.O.A.D for Life subscription for just $10 a month. This is an all-in package. You'll get everything from Tier 1 plus a monthly bonus episode, early access to our R.O.A.D 10 and R.O.A.D Talk interviews, behind-the-scenes content, our In the Crate series, along with exclusive unreleased content. This is your chance to support the podcast and get more of what you love. Join the family today at patreon.com/R.O.A.D podcast. Check the link in our descriptions. We appreciate you. Let's keep this journey going.
Well, you're speaking on people not only saying that. I mean, I think it's undeniable that rap music is black music, but there's all music in general, from salsa, everything comes from, like, even drums from Africa. There's hip hop is influenced by Jamaica, like reggae, and it's like it's undeniable that rap music is influenced by black music. But I think there was a conversation that Latinos, Puerto Ricans were not a part of building hip hop, the culture itself.
Right.
And they were attacking white people, Puerto Ricans, non-black people, saying that they weren't a part of hip hop history.
Right.
Which is like never been an actual conversation.
No.
And me growing up in hip hop culture in New York, I almost felt like hip hop was the most colorblind culture of anything.
Yes.
It was like
It's beautiful.
I mean, it was almost like, I felt like hip hop was a place for just broke kids. Like, it's just broke kids to express themselves.
Shit, you might as well have written the book, bro.
Nah.
Like, I could leave right. You can handle the rest of the interview by yourself, because that's what hip hop is. Right? Exactly.
Like, whether you were Puerto Rican, Dominican, growing up in an all black neighborhood, or, like, everyone was kind of meshed together. There was always different cultures. There was Irish Puerto Ricans. There was, New York is a very diverse city.
Right.
Well, tell us about your background, Rob, where you come from and how you came to this place.
My parents immigrated here to New York City in 1969. Actually, my dad came first.
Okay.
In 1969, he met my mom at a hospital that he was the supervisor in. And he decided to come to New York, like so many other people from the Caribbean, from Central America, from other parts of South America, from the south of the United States. I'd say between 1945 and the early 1970s, there was a great migration that took place to New York City right after World War II. And my dad was one of those people that decided, I'm going to uproot myself from Colombia and relocate to New York City and experience that whole American dream thing that we're sold, right, in this country. In 1971, or by 1971, he got himself established. It's crazy because my dad had this really good job in Colombia as a supervisor at a hospital, again, where my mom worked. But then when he came to New York City, he had to humble himself and get a factory job.
Right.
So he worked at a factory for 2 years, got himself established there, sent for my mom and my brother. They arrived in 71, hooked my mom up with a job at the factory that he was working in. Mm-hmm. It was called Lee Craft, and they used to make parts for airplanes in Long Island City, in New York City, or in Queens. And they had me in 1972. I was born in...
They spoke a little English? Or
my dad, to this day, doesn't really speak the best English. My mom, she acclimated herself much better than my dad.
What neighborhood did they move to?
So we lived in Jackson Heights, Queens, and to this day, I'm a resident there. I lived in Connecticut for about a year. I was on a TV show for ESPN and couldn't do the back and forth. Yeah. So I got an apartment in Connecticut, and that was cool, living outside of Jackson Heights. But I've always lived there, born and raised. You know, I cut my teeth in that neighborhood. Well, literally and figuratively. I chipped my tooth. I remember playing trying to touch football on the street. But I cut my teeth in a sense that what I am with regards to hip hop culture, I owe to my upbringing in Jackson Heights, Queens.
Okay, was your parents like musical or anything like that?
Yeah.
My dad wasn't necessarily the most musical person. My mom definitely isn't musical. But the thing is, we grew up in a tenement building in Jackson Heights, myself and my older brother. And anyone that knows what tenement buildings are like, it's not like a condo or, you know, a luxury apartment building. Tenement buildings, you're crammed into small spaces. My building had rats and roaches, and it wasn't the most comfortable living environment. But again, my dad had to humble himself and like start from scratch, excuse the pun. So what he did, the reason I preface what I'm going to say by giving you background on how I grew up and where I lived is because to make extra money, what my dad did was he picked up DJing. So he saved up money, bought turntables, good turntables. He bought a 1600 Technique turntable and a 1300 Technique turntable. And he had this huge, like it had to be like this big, like a maybe even bigger, a GLI mixer. And it was a 4-channel mixer. So it was like two mixers in one.
Knobs.
And it had rotary knobs.
What inspired him to get into DJing? Like, what was going on? Like, did he see like block parties or what was going on?
So he liked music.
Yeah.
He wasn't necessarily musical, but he liked music. And in New York City during the 70s, DJ culture started to grow. And whether it was East Elmhurst, Corona, Jackson Heights, obviously the Bronx, the Lower East Side of Manhattan, people were...
Can't forget about Brooklyn, please.
Brooklyn, my bad. My bad. Brooklyn, you had people that were investing into equipment if they could afford it and throwing parties in gymnasiums, in churches, outside if they had to, or playing from their apartments and positioning their speaker outside of the window for the neighborhood to hear you rock. You know, this was a culture that was blossoming, DJ culture that is, in the 1970s. And so my dad was a part of that wave. And again, to make extra money, he purchased what at the time was state-of-the-art equipment. And he started DJing parties for his friends. He would have me, my brother, and my mom help him pack his gear up, and we would transport it with him to these different locations. We'd go as far as New Jersey to DJ parties, or for him to DJ parties, and we'd watch him. And that was my first exposure to DJing, was through my father. Now, I had an older brother my brother's 59, I'm 52. So he's 7 years older than me. And he came up with that first wave of youth, inner city kids discovering this form of expression that wasn't formal. You know, it's not like my brother picked up a bass guitar or drumsticks and was playing drums or was dancing in a dance studio. He was embracing this form of expression that was, I like to say, sort of like a bastard way of identifying as a creative person. So you dance, but you're not doing these like pirouettes or anything like that. You're instead spinning on your back on cardboard. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And you draw art, but instead of drawing that art in a classroom, you're drawing it on the city. Literally, the city is your canvas. And with regards to DJing, instead of, again, picking up a bass guitar, you're using the turntable and buying records and taking the sounds on these records and using them as your palette for expression. And if you can't sing, you rap. My brother was immersed in every element of what wasn't even called hip hop during the 70s. So I was grateful, to this day I still am, because as a kid, I got to see my brother interact with his friends and experience himself as a DJ, using my dad's equipment without his permission, as a breaker, as a MC, as a graffiti artist. And then I was also being exposed to the art of controlling a room of people through my dad, because he played music. And he wasn't just playing salsa, merengue, cumbia. He would ask me and my brother to go buy records for him that we thought the people that he was going to DJ for on a particular weekend would like. So we would go record shopping for him and buy Soul Makossa and Bob James and the kind of breaks that Kool Herc and Flash and Bam were playing at the Park Jams and all that. So I am super thankful because I was exposed to hip hop organically before it was even called hip hop.
Yeah.
You know?
It's only natural that you would become a DJ, right?
Yeah. My brother and father, man, they planted the seed in me at a very early age.
And you're like the firstborn in the States, right?
I am the firstborn American in my family, and I say that with pride, man. And I get choked up thinking about it because my dad took this chance, right? Mm-hmm. Coming here to New York for the sake of his family. And that gamble paid off. His son is an author. His son wrote a book. You know what I'm saying? And in the acknowledgments, I mentioned my dad and my mom and my brother by name. And I'm glad that like I have this sort of as a cemented sort of like legacy of like who the Los Aguilares son, who we are as a family, and the fact that, yeah, man, we did it. You know what I'm saying? We're here. We did it.
It's important. I think it means a lot. Like I'm the first like born in the States for my family. And I think, you know, when you're born in the States, it's like New York is just filled with like, you know, built with all these like misplaced families from different countries and cultures together.
What ethnicity are you exactly?
I'm Korean.
You're Korean.
Yeah.
I remember on my block, Crooked, 89th Street, we lived in 3752 was the building number. And in my building, we had Ecuadorians. On the other side of the building, I was best friends with this kid named James, who passed away a few years ago. Rest in peace, James. On my floor, there was an Italian family.
Yeah.
Across the street, my first girlfriend, she was Puerto Rican. Her name was Delilah. And I would go to her house and like her mom would play like salsa. Then in that same building on the opposite side of the side that she lived in, there was this kid named Stefan who was Jewish. And I remember the first time I ate matzah was at Stefan's house and like learning about Jewish culture. Then there was a house adjacent to my building where I think they were Chinese. It was a Chinese family, I believe. And they had a daughter. And we would never play with the daughter because she was a girl, right? Yeah. But like she would say, hey, hi, Rob, or hi, guys, or whatever, when she was like walking past us and we'd be on the street playing two-hand touch football. And so the beauty of Jackson Heights and why I'm so grateful that I grew up there, and I feel the reason why I was able to write this book is because of the diversity in my neighborhood.
Right.
And if you don't grow up with that in terms of hip hop, you think erroneously that it's a culture made up of one race, but it isn't. Hip hop is the ultimate amalgamation of all races.
So all these people were coming to your parties, is what you're saying? Like all those people were coming to the party?
The first party that I ever DJ'd at, it was at my junior high school, 145, IS 145 on Northern Boulevard between 80th Street and 79th Street. I actually live 2 blocks from there now. And
I mean, it's not a Jewish neighborhood, though.
It's not a neighborhood that really you can say is dominated by one ethnicity. Because I really don't believe in race.
Right.
There's no such thing as race. That's an allegory. Mm-hmm. You have ethnicities, you have different nationalities, and in Jackson Heights, you see it all. And my first party that I ever DJ'd at, it was a Geo party at my junior high school. I was 12 years old, and every kid from all over the world was seeing 12-year-old DJ Robbie Rob, right, scratching, backspinning, mixing, and I was playing all kind of music, not just disco or not just hip hop. Mm-hmm. I was playing everything because hip hop is a combination of all genres of music. It's not just, sorry to interrupt you, it's not just black music.
Yeah. I mean, it's that feeling when you're like, whether you're in a cypher or you're DJing or you're doing graph or you're breakdancing, and like all of a sudden everyone's bigging you up and you become a part of this room and everyone's unified, and it's like it doesn't matter what race, color, it doesn't matter how tall or ugly, gender, or handsome, it doesn't matter.
None of that matters.
It was just like, yo, Rob was dope.
You're connecting to creativity, right?
And it's one of the only it's one of the only cultures where all of these like people from all these backgrounds, from all these classes and races come together and they just unify immediately. It's the one thing that I love about hip hop, you know, like growing up in my neighborhood, I was like bullied a lot. I was like, I just wanted to be invisible. Mm-hmm. But then with hip hop, it was like even in the early days of late 80s or 90s, you could like spot somebody who was into hip hop. It was a very underground thing. So when you spotted somebody, you were like, yo, you know, you wearing this shit, you know.
Mm-hmm. I was just going to say it.
Yeah.
You spotted them not necessarily by the color of their skin, but by what they were wearing and their swag.
Right.
As a 12-year-old kid, I was a part of a b-boy crew. That was the first element of hip-hop that I interacted with. It was breaking.
Now, to be fair, this is 84, 85. You're 12 years old, right?
No, I started breaking in 79.
I'm not saying that, but I'm saying, but you're talking about the times when you're DJing.
83.
This is like 83, 84.
Yeah.
Hip-hop had already started, so it's not like this everywhere. And it's probably more prevalent to be like how you're describing it 10 years after or 15 years after.
I don't think hip-hop started in the early 70s.
Really, why is that?
Because, so let's define what hip hop is. What would you define hip hop to be?
I think it's more of a political, socio-economic type of, it's kind of like a condition to a certain degree that creates hip hop.
We agree there. So we definitely agree with regards to the circumstances that created it or made the space for it to create itself.
Right.
Artistically, let's just say artistically, right? What is hip hop?
Artistically is funk, soul, gospel, blues. I believe it's the sounds of jazz, but I believe that it's all rooted in Black American music.
Okay, that's where you lost me, right? So here's what I would say to that. If hip hop started, when would you say, one last question, when would you say hip hop began, or what group of people, like by name, would you say started this culture that involved those genres of music?
I think that it's a continuation of a conversation. It's not a nuclear thing. It's something that moved and shaped in different circumstances and events linked like a timeline.
And who was a part artistically, creatively? Who was a part of the initial events, like the park jams and the rapping? Like, could you name names?
Names to me
that come to mind.
To come to mind from my earliest experiences. I'm from Brooklyn. I was born and raised in Brooklyn. My family's from America, born and raised in the South in New York. My first inklings of hip hop would be The Last Poets or Muhammad Ali.
Okay.
Or music by James Brown, or stuff that had rap in it, like Isaac Hayes, or Curtis Mayfield, stuff like that.
So you're saying it's been like decades of evolution?
Definitely. It's definitely an ingredients of stuff that has been going. But then if you think about it, I was born in '72 myself. So my brother would say, they were doing that on the radio with Jocko or Hank Spann or Gary Bird, and that predates '72 as well. So, I'm the youngest of 6. So my family will be able to tell me, no, they've been doing the rap stuff before you even started thinking about doing it.
Do you think it's possible that there were non-blacks rapping?
I haven't seen any documentation of that. I've seen black people doing it in the 50s. I've seen black people do it in the 60s.
You ever heard of Danny Kaye? He was a comedian.
Danny Kaye, yes, I have seen Danny Kaye.
There's a movie featuring Danny Kaye as a star. He was this white comedian. The movie's called The Court Jester. Came out in 1955. And there are 2 scenes where he's rapping in it.
Okay.
And it's 1955.
Okay.
Right? I actually have the video. I don't know if you could play audio on here.
We can play the video when we edit. Yeah.
When I was a lad, I was gloomy and sad as I was from the day I was born. When other babes giggled and gurgled and wiggled, I proudly was loudly forlorn. My friends and my family looked at me clammily, thought there was something amiss. When others found various antics hilarious, all I could manage was this.
So, look it up on YouTube, Danny Kaye. He's rapping.
Okay.
Court gestures. And my point is this. You and I, we agree on some things with regards to the initial formative years of how this thing came to be. And then there are things about what you said that I disagree on. And let's look at DJing, right?
No, let me just touch on the Danny Kaye thing. The thing with Danny Kaye is, I've heard of him. He's a comedian. I am familiar with him. But the fact of the matter is, just because it's presented that way doesn't mean that they were the arbiters of that art form. It could have just been they had access. I mean, Danny Kaye is pretty much a privileged white guy that was out there. That's not saying that Colonel Sanders made fried chicken or he made the ingredients for fried chicken.
Of course
Just
not.
because he's the face of it doesn't mean that he didn't get it from a different source.
Hey, yo, what's good? This is the R.O.A.D podcast, Reflections of a DJ. We're here in New York City, and we have invaded the Sound Collective. Now, I want to explain what the Sound Collective is. I got my man Lefty from the Sound Collective here. Lefty, thank you for having us and hosting this beautiful studio for us. Exactly what is the Sound Collective here in New York?
Modern, state-of-the-art facility with tons of production gear. And one side of it is you can be a member and you can come here and pay monthly to use the rooms and the gear and sign out time in our space. We have a state-of-the-art studio. We have all these production stations, DJ stations, instrument practicing rooms and such like that.
And you also like teach. You have like classes and sessions, right?
We have intensive programs, short-term programs that people can come and take Saturday classes on DJing, production.
There's like kind of a community building within where there's like DJs, producers, musicians.
Up and coming producers, people honing their craft and learning, and DJs and all these things. And they come here and practice, and we have all the new gear, so they come to check that out and get familiar. And a lot of DJs will come in from out of town, be like, let me get a day pass so I can just get a refresh on the 3000s and the V10.
And what's great is that a lot of our guests, everyone from like Clark Kent to the technician to like Camilo, they come in here and they're just like, holy shit.
You want to play with all the gear, man? Yeah.
I didn't even realize this, but you guys have like studio spaces where people can do live streams and they can do their Twitch streams.
Yep. We got a whole green screen set up already, multicam, full on switcher. Like, we also do a lot of events here. We're bringing a lot of outside talent, organizations. We got a big event coming up with DJ City, Beat Source, and Serato.
That's part of our family.
Yeah. We did a big one last year with them. We got another one coming up.
For our listeners, is there any way we could hook them up with a deal, or, you know, like if they put in a R.O.A.D podcast code?
Yeah, tell me about it. What else do you have envisioned for this deal? It sounds like we're well on our way. Why don't you tell them?
You're working with us where they can type in a code for like R.O.A.D.
Yep.
And they'll get a month free, right?
Yeah, on our online platform. We have a whole online platform with like masterclass style education.
Nice.
Different categories and everything, instruments, drums. I mean, and then we have these things that we're launching right now called Pro Paths. So you can choose, like if you're a producer, you can take the Ableton Pro Path, the Logic Pro Path, Serato Studio. Goes through a wide variety of knowledge besides just stuff in that skill set and discipline.
So our R.O.A.D listeners, if you're in New York, you can check out their facility. You can do a day pass, a week pass, a monthly pass. You can check out their site. You have access to all the education online.
Soundcollective.com. We also have a YouTube channel that has some of our content from the educational courses, and all of our events are live streamed and put up there.
I hope we can come back here and use your facilities again.
Looking forward to it.
Shout to Lefty and the Sound Collective. Thank you so much.
Right. And that actually is my point with all of this. It's that depending on what hip hop is, it's you bringing your personal experience to a creative space. And you can't say because one person's personal experience unfolded a certain way that is the narrative of what hip hop is. Hip hop is a combination of different narratives meshed together. You know how I discovered Danny Kaye? Through Tila Rock.
Okay.
And you know what Tila Rock is?
It's yours.
It's yours. Tila Rock is the first rapper signed to Def Jam. And he and I talk a lot. He's like one of my guys that I go to whenever I want to understand this culture a little more. I don't just get my information from podcasts or YouTube videos. Like, I talk to the guys that were on the ground, right? And then I filter that information and I make sense of it in my own way. And he was like, bro, the first time I saw someone rap, it was watching this movie called The Court Jester. I'm like, Court Jester? He's like, yeah, this kid, Danny Kaye, like, there was a scene where he wasn't necessarily rapping to a beat, but he was talking and making words rhyme. And as a kid, I was like, yo, that's crazy. So Tila Rock, It's Yours, from It's Yours fame, signed, the first artist signed to Def Jam, is not saying the first interaction that I had with someone rapping or making words rhyme was Muhammad Ali, or he's not telling me that it was Coke LaRock. He's telling me that it was a white comedian in a movie that had nothing to do with hip hop. So my thing is, when does something start? That's the question that we need to answer and figure out, because, or maybe there is no figuring out or answering that, because when does something start? Depending on who you're talking to, their start point, their vector for how they experience and interact with this culture could be different. So for you, it could be The Last Poets.
Right.
For someone else, it could be Danny Kaye.
But I'm just going from the fact of my age group, because I know, like I said, I can't speak for beyond 72. I can speak for not even really 72. I can speak to maybe like 75, maybe 76. You know what I mean? But I know that for not so much for a fact, I just know that this stuff has a lineage that goes back further than 71 and 72 is what they claim.
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want, you could go back to Egyptian hieroglyphics as far as
graffiti goes, yeah.
Right? So,
and even breakdancing. I mean, dancing goes way, way back.
right, exactly. There are Africans in Nigeria, northern Nigeria, to be specific, that you could Google cavorting. It's a style of dance, a celebratory dance, and you see it, and the vernacular of the dance is very similar to breaking. You see Africans doing floats, you see Africans doing flips, you see them doing swipes. It's just not on wood or cardboard, it's on dirt. And instead of there being turntables, they're conga players.
All right. So with that being said, if we're going back and we're saying, you know, Africans and this, that, then why is there such an uproar when it's being said that it's a black art form?
This is why. Around the time, to circle this conversation back to what you said, Crooked, regarding 2020 and how polarizing that year was with COVID and George Floyd, and this conversation about appropriation, hip hop artists, a lot of DJs getting on Instagram and apologizing for taking black culture or admitting that they're benefiting from black culture. Around that time, there were groups, factions that started to surface online, and basically their plight is reparations, right? So they want reparations from this country for slavery. And these factions don't recognize Africans or the bigger diaspora of black people that live in here, America, South America, Europe, Canada, Central America, the Caribbean. They don't recognize Africans from the bigger diaspora because in their eyes, their lineage. So for me, for example, if you look at my ancestry, my lineage, obviously it's going to date back to Africa. Slave ships dropped off Africans in South America, the Caribbean, Central America, and the United States, right? But because my parents come from Colombia, these factions don't recognize me as being black. They see me as being an immigrant, a filthy immigrant. And so because of well, let me finish. Because of that, yeah, no, it's crazy. And because of that, there's this uproar. They don't want it. They're basically co-opting hip hop and lumping it into their reparations argument.
Yeah.
And so that someone like me, who's been involved in hip hop since 1979, if they were to hypothetically get reparations from the hip hop industry, I can't see any of that money. That's what this is about. It's not about creativity. It's not about culture. It's about this.
From the conversations that I've had about like these groups that you're talking about, like ADOS, American Descendants of Slaves, I think you mentioned some other ones before we started recording. They've been talking about Black Americans and the separation between Black Americans and Black immigrants.
Exactly.
So, you know, even like Kool Herc, Afrika Bambaataa, Grandmaster Flash,
they all make a distinction.
They're saying they are not pioneers of hip hop. They
copying.
They got credit for being pioneers of hip hop, but they were black immigrants because they have Caribbean descent, West Indian descent.
Here's the thing about that.
Yeah.
Grandmaster Flash, the guy who's responsible for why the three of us are sitting at this table podcasting, pioneered all of the formative techniques that us DJs use. He's a big reason why I have a DJ school. And his lineage is Caribbean. How can you take his black card away when, if in the Bronx there was an APB out on a black teen wearing a Kangol, they would have stopped Flash and not asked, are you Black American? Or are you Puerto Rican? Or are you from Barbados? They would just stop him. You know what I'm saying? There are people, dude, factions, extremists, xenophobes that don't recognize the African diaspora. And so because of that, to your point, there's this uproar. That's why there's this division that's playing out in front of us, especially on social media.
Right.
Bro, it's people that have iPhones, but not turntables. They have a profile on X, but no one knows who they are in relation to hip hop. They're not breakers, they're not rappers, they're not DJs, they're not writers. You ask any of them who Tracy 168 is, and they won't know. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, it's people that are under this illusion because they're brainwashed that hip hop is a lineage, and it's not. Hip hop is not a lineage. Hip hop is a creative right. It's not a birthright. So if you do it, it belongs to you.
I think a lot of the controversy with the whole FBA thing or the ADOS thing, conversation gets a little bit blurred about what it's about. I will say I'm not from another country. I'm from here. And then my peoples are from here. But I think with the larger conversation is that with social media and stuff of that nature that's being perforated, is that it's almost assumed that everybody came here through slavery, and that's not exactly true. We were people that were already here, that were black. So how do you
quantify that? How do you prove that?
Well, are you saying that are Europeans over here? Europeans have said to themselves that we found this place by accident.
Goldie, what you're trying to say is that there were Africans and there were black people from all over the world that were brought here against their will,
right,
as slaves,
right,
versus black immigrants who were kind of like they came willingly to America,
right,
with the opportunity.
But
you're not. You're not saying you're not. I just want to clarify. Excuse me for interrupting.
Okay.
You're not saying that the native people to America are black. You're not saying that. You are saying that. He's saying that.
I'm saying that as long with the Native Americans, they were native blacks that were here. So it's like I don't have to trace back my roots. My roots are here. You dig what I'm saying?
How do you quantify that? Like where, I don't know.
I mean, it's quantifiable because I can go back to my family and say, okay, where are you from? I'm from North Carolina. I'm from this place. And it can go back to generation to generation
and
to
you're
generation
saying
to
that
generation.
At some point,
everybody that came over here were enslaved, bro. I mean.
So you're saying, but came over here from, where did these black people come from? That, like, for example, if your lineage is America, not Africa, right? Not Africa. Like, if we were to trace back your family lineage hundreds of years, thousands of years, you're saying we wouldn't end up in Africa. We'd end up still here in America, yeah?
I would say over the last 200, 300 years where you would say...
Oh, that 200, 300 years, but before that.
You're saying that, the slave trade brought my people over here. I'm saying no, the slave trade did not bring my people here. We were already here.
How about the people that preceded those people that were here? Where did they come from?
I would have to guess that those people were black too.
And they came from where?
They were here. Just like if
here.
on the other side of the world, if you go to Australia and say where you came from, they were there.
So you're saying that there are Black Americans who were indigenous to America,
Of course,
this country.
of course,
aligned with Native Americans.
of course. I mean, why wouldn't we be? We're everywhere else in the world. Why wouldn't we be indigenous to that place?
Okay, so let's say that Goldfinger is right. When we tie this argument or this truth to hip hop, does that mean that because I started DJing in 1983, does that mean because I started interacting with breaking, excuse me, in 79, does that mean because I started writing graph in 1981, not the 70s, early 70s, that hip hop isn't something that I can claim ownership to?
I would say that, but what I would say is that if the conversation is talking about people that were here before you were here, it's not your conversation.
Yeah, but this isn't, the City of Hip Hop isn't a book that talks about anthropology from a perspective of what races, quote unquote, of people were here in America first. This book talks about hip hop and the circumstances that created the space for it to happen.
I haven't read the book, so I haven't read the book yet.
If that's the case, if the talk or the debate online is who does this culture belong to, not which race was here in America first, because I'm not going to even argue that, right? I'm not an anthropologist. I can't begin to even have that debate about who was in this country first. But what I can debate to the death is hip hop, because I've been doing it since 1979. You know what I'm saying? So my thing is, if I'm sorry to interrupt you,
go
Crooked,
ahead,
but if these factions of people are talking about, well, hip hop is a lineage, because that's what, it's not if, it's what they're saying. Hip hop is something that's a lineage, like it belongs to you because of your lineage. And if your lineage specifically is slavery, then you own hip hop. And other races are tethers or anchor babies. I'm sorry, I'm not a tether and I'm not an anchor baby. You know what I'm saying? Like I've been doing this for too long.
I don't understand the terms that you're saying as far as
terms that these factions use.
I haven't heard it in that way. But what I will say is that if you are a person that's from here, right, and you've been here and your family traces back, there's conversations that you can have that nobody else can have for you. You get what I'm saying?
Okay, all right, so let's see. Let's say a regular Black American on Twitter wants to talk about 70s hip hop. They don't break, they don't DJ, they don't rap, they don't write graffiti. Do you think that person has a right to have a discussion with Crooked about 70s hip hop?
Yeah, because I think that if they're having a conversation about 70s hip hop and they're not prefaced on the subject, or they don't have any idea about what they're talking about, nobody should talk to them about hip hop, 70s hip hop.
So you said, but you started off your sentence by saying yeah.
No, I'm saying
okay,
yes.
Okay. Yeah. So you agree with me?
I'm really not into the, how do you say, what are they, consequentials?
Well, Goldie, why don't you clarify exactly what makes you uncomfortable, or what is the uncomfortable part of kind of like non-Black Americans speaking about the history of hip hop?
I think that there are very certain specific stuff that happened to Black Americans,
right,
that has no bearing on anybody else. Just specifically,
like I agree.
Specifically what?
Specifically, like the Tuskegee experiment. Okay. That was specifically Black Americans. That dealt with their issue. If we brought it up,
did those group of Black Americans break?
No, I'm just talking in American.
But what does that have to do with hip hop?
But what I'm saying is, if you're talking specifically about Black Americans and an issue, they have a right to specifically talk about their issue as it pertains to their race or genre or
I agree with.
sect.
I agree
You
with.
get what I'm saying?
I agree with both of you. I think what you're talking about is there are sacrifices and contributions made by Black Americans and Black descendants of America that affected and influenced and impacted hip hop.
That had
The
nothing
birth
to
of
do
hip-
with anybody
Exactly.
that was Dominican.
And
that had nothing to do with anybody that was Asian.
Yeah.
That had nothing to do with it.
Definitely.
If that happened to Black Americans,
Yes.
then they have the right to say,
Right.
hey, yo, this happened to us, blah, 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 blah. Y'all should deal with that. And I think a lot of issues of Black Americans haven't been dealt with, and this is where I think a lot of the controversy is coming from.
But and then just to clarify, and I agree with you on that, but I also agree with Rob to a certain degree. I think something happened in the 70s, and it's interesting. You said a nuclear reaction. It's like almost like a chemical reaction where all these ingredients, the influences and contributions of Black Americans, immigrants, all together, having to do with the poverty, and having to do with even like the blackout and the riots and gangs. All of these things, all of these put together exploded, and that chain reaction happened at a certain time, at a certain decade. And that's kind of like, I think that's what Rob is saying, is that hip hop itself, there's no denying the impact and contributions of Black Americans.
That's silly.
But there's some chain reaction with these gangs that were filled with like, Black Puerto Ricans and other races together. And those gangs becoming breakdancing crews and like changing. And I don't know if they
or just real quick because we got to be very specific about how we talk about this so that you don't get DMs crooked.
Please correct me. Please correct me.
Well, not gangs whose members had Puerto Ricans and Blacks and other ethnicities. We got to be careful about saying races.
Yeah, my bad.
Right? Ethnicities.
Gotcha.
Here's the thing. Why didn't hip hop start in Mississippi?
Who say it did?
How would you say that hip hop started in Mississippi?
Well, a lot of the sources of the music come from
what
the
is
South.
hip hop?
I mean, the source material of the music. Before we get into
hip hop isn't just music. Isn't just music.
Before we get into the term of hip hop, you start with the ingredients. Where are the ingredients coming from?
Yes. So let's talk about the ingredients.
Okay.
So, am I right in saying that hip hop has 4 ingredients?
You have to let me know what that is.
DJing.
Okay.
Rapping.
Okay.
Breaking.
Okay.
Graffiti.
Okay, but I think it would have a little bit more elements if you.
Those are the 4 core elements, yes or no?
I think those are the popular elements.
All right, so when hip hop got its name let's just go by not what we think, but by facts.
Yeah, but
hold on.
The facts may be facts, but the facts are romanticized, and you can't deny that a lot of stuff that have been portrayed to us or have been put on the table as quote unquote facts, or this is how it was, are romanticized.
Okay, so for the sake of this amazing discussion, let's just go by the cemented consensus take on the elements of hip hop, what makes up the culture. When hip hop got its name, it was in the early 80s.
Who gave hip hop its name?
Africa Bambaataa.
Okay, I'll take that.
Okay.
That.
And Bam gave it its elements. And there were 4 core elements: breaking, DJing, rapping, graffiti.
So no knowledge?
That came after.
So knowledge wasn't...
I talk about knowledge in the book.
But knowledge wasn't before?
No, I mean, it was 4 elements: breaking, DJing, rapping, graffiti.
Wait, can you break down knowledge? Because I've never heard knowledge.
Knowledge is an element that came after. I started...
Or was it recognized after? But I think it was always there. Because if you think about it, a lot of the core people that were pioneers or people that was on the radio, like C. Just Allah. Those guys were God body. So those teachings were in the music before 84.
Right. I
So
get it.
knowledge would have to be.
My brother was a 5%.
So knowledge would have to be a core element, and that is not something that's not from America.
I understand that.
That's an American science.
I understand that. But if you read the 1982 Africa Bambaata's hip hop article that appeared in the Village Voice, and the author was Stephen Hager.
Okay.
Bam talks about 4 elements, not 5, 4. Okay, so let's just go off, for argument's sake, let's go off those 4 core elements, right?
Yeah.
If hip hop is those 4 elements and rapping 1000%, we have to credit black people for that. DJing, that's where it gets a little weird. By all means, I would not argue anyone that says scratching, backspinning were techniques that were created by black people. But this is where it gets weird. These factions don't recognize Flash as black American. They see him as immigrant. And there weren't DJs scratching before Flash. And if you're saying DJing, just playing records, right? Just playing music is hip hop. There were Italian DJs like David Mancuso playing music way before 1973. Francis Grasso was in the discos mixing Soma Cosa, all the popular songs that were out in the early 70s, mixing, DJing in disco clubs, discotheques.
Right.
And these are non-black people.
Okay.
So then how do you say that hip hop, that to circle back the conversation, that person on Twitter that is like, yo, I have a right to talk about hip hop and this, that, and a third because my lineage is slavery. But you just said, right, okay, that DJing in and of itself is not hip hop. It's what you do to the music. It's the scratching, it's the backspinning that makes it hip hop. And there were no black or non-black DJs manipulating records, manipulating vinyl like Flash up until he stepped into the scene. Then the techniques started. As far as scratching is concerned, Theodore all day. And I believe Theodore's family comes from the South. Ground was a Theodore. But you can't make a blanket statement and say this culture belongs to black people when I just gave you examples of people who in the eyes of these factions are non-black.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying?
Well,
and I'll give two more examples. Breaking. As we know it, forget about Kaduna and cavorting and Nigeria and Africa, right? Forget about that. Breaking started according to an American black b-boy from the first formative years of this culture, Charlie Rock, a Zulu king. He says that they started breaking in 1975, right? In 1975, there was a crew called the Bronx Boys, TBB, who were breakers. And guess what? They were all Puerto Rican. Spy, the inventor of the 6-step, a move that you have to do when you go down to the floor, was created by a Puerto Rican. The 3-step, a move you have to do if you're going to go down to the floor and showcase your breaking moves, was created by Batch, the leader of the TBB crew from the Bronx. He was Puerto Rican as well. So again, how can you say that this culture is exclusively a black creation, a black American creation, when Puerto Ricans had so much to do with the lexicon of the dance? And don't even get me started about graffiti. I would say 40% of the writers were Latinos, and a lot were white, and a lot were black as well. But you can't say that hip hop is an exclusive culture created by black people. I just think the information is just in front of you. You know what I mean? And like, I think you're kind of like, not you, but I'm saying anyone that does, they're just refusing to surrender to the truth because of this whole reparations thing. And it's like they can't co-opt hip hop culture. They can't lump it into their reparations argument if it's not something that there's a consensus around it being exclusively black. So that's why there's this struggle. It has nothing to do with the art of it. It's the money. It's the green. That's the color that I feel is polarizing our culture right now. Because when you take the green out of it, we're all disenfranchised, poor kids growing up in tenement buildings, projects, and I could give a fuck if your family came from here or not. I just want to know if Goldfinger could do that transformer scratch. I could give a fuck if Crooked is Korean or Chinese or Japanese. Yo, can he write a dope burner? That's what matters to me, not lineage. These terms, lineage and birthright, are new terms that have been introduced to hip hop that did not exist when I first discovered you. You know what I'm saying?
Can I ask you specifically, in maybe the briefest way you can, what do you think was the chain reaction that happened in the 70s? What, like, all of these things that led up to all these four elements of hip hop occurring at the same time, evolving, like, aligned with each other, parallel to each other, and forming this culture all together, you know?
So
and why specifically the Bronx? Because the title of your book says New York City, the Bronx, right?
Yeah.
And
New York City, the Bronx, and a peace meeting.
yeah.
So, all right, let's talk about economics. The Bronx, New York was the location in our city that was heavily redlined. There were other parts of New York City. Jackson Heights, where I grew up in, was redlined. Corona, Queens was redlined.
Everywhere in New York
Right,
City.
right, exactly. But the Bronx was heavily redlined.
What do you mean?
Red line is like separated by neighborhoods.
Right.
Whether it be highways or, subways
Got it.
or elevated trains. It separates certain neighborhoods to where it's like they have a little bit more economic growth. Sometimes even with the planning, like Robert Moses, he decided to build the what is the FDR?
The Cross Bronx Expressway.
Cross Bronx Expressway and the BQE.
And the Southington Parkway as well.
A lot of this stuff went straight through neighborhoods that were thriving.
Okay.
And because of the construction.
It wasn't necessarily thriving. What it was neighborhoods that were dilapidated, actually.
No,
and hold on. Let me make sure that we explain this the right way. The Southern State Parkway was a road that was built from the inner cities of New York to Long Island. And it was basically an escape route. That's why they called it a parkway to the parks in Long Island, right? So when you say they built these roads in well-to-do parts of New York City, that's not quite right, because they built the roads in areas that New York City hired Robert Moses to clean up.
All right, that's the story that they give you. But the fact of the matter is they were thriving neighborhoods in, just say, Central Park. Central Park was pretty much redlined or destroyed to create the park, but those were thriving black neighborhoods. Seneca Village, that's what it used to be called. So there's a lot of New York information that, you know what I mean, that's being unveiled, or people, when doing the research, you can see that this stuff wasn't always because it was nefarious types of situations of why they did what they did.
We definitely agree that the construction of the Southern State Parkway in 1925, it finished in 1968. Then in 1948, Robert Moses started the construction of the Cross Bronx Expressway. Again, decimated neighborhoods, displaced a lot of blacks and Puerto Ricans in the Bronx. That finished in 1972. Urban planning, right? I'm trying to answer this as best as I could in a narrow space of time.
Right.
Then couple that with redlining. The Bronx, New York City, again, was a heavily redlined area of New York City. And what redlining is, you take out a map, you take a red marker, a green marker, a blue marker, and then you start drawing borders in areas that are either well-to-do, i.e. where white people live, that have money, and then areas that are poorer, where impoverished people or colored people live, i.e. Latinos. A lot of Puerto Ricans lived in New York City. So when we say Puerto Ricans, we kind of aren't necessarily excluding other Latinos, but Puerto Ricans were the majority Latino community in New York in the 1970s, especially in the Bronx, and black people, right? So if you're white and you are rich and you move to New York City and you sit down with the bank and you're trying to get a mortgage out on a house, what the bank does is they're like, all right, we're going to encourage you to buy property in this area that's green because we want to keep the redlined area where the blacks and the Puerto Ricans live isolated, confined to the Bronx. So there's that, right? So geography, that's the second part of the answer. The Great Migration, you had families from Central America, from the Caribbean, from South America, like my family, from the South, like your family probably, here in, I don't know exactly, I say probably because I don't know exactly from where they are from in the South. Right. Migrating up to New York City because New York City became this hub for opportunity, right? So people would get here to New York from these different countries.
Was like that was in the 60s?
That it started after World War II, so let's say after 1945. Right. But it got heavy in the late 60s and early 70s. Heavy from the Central American, South American, Caribbean parts of the world. So when you backtrack and think about redlining, if I'm Jamaican and I get to New York City with my family, you know, I'm not rich and I'm trying to figure out where to live. I'm being ushered like like sheep into this area of the Bronx where other Jamaicans, or I mean, at the time, if you were Jamaican, you were black. Didn't matter. They saw you as black. So they were going to lump you in this area of the Bronx where other blacks and, you know, Caribbeans lived. So there's the redlining part of it. Now, what's beautiful about the whole thing is that the Bronx specifically was like a petri dish. So you put in urban planning, you put in redlining, you put in the Great Migration, and now you have these marginalized people living in this dense area of the Bronx, New York City, on top of each other, right? Then factor in economics. The city in the 1970s was experiencing a crazy fiscal crisis. There was no money being funded to the police department. And because of that, there was no supervision in the streets. So then these kids that lived on top of each other and had nothing had to figure out resourceful ways to be creative and just do shit, right? And because gang violence was so prevalent in the Bronx, during, let's say, the early 70s, when you had gangs like the Savage Nomads, the Black Spades, the Ghetto Brothers, you couldn't have block parties and park jams because gangs was not having that shit. You couldn't go from one neighborhood to the next without getting checked by a gang. So jams like that couldn't take place. Were you gonna?
Well, I wanted to ask because the West Coast and Cali, LA specifically, gangs were really kind of like racial. It was Mexican gangs and black gangs,
Right.
but in the Bronx, these gangs
Were integrated. In the Bronx, a lot of these gangs were integrated. The Ghetto Brothers was an integrated gang. The Black Spades was an integrated.
So they weren't black gangs and Puerto Rican gangs. They were all kind of just. It was more neighborhood.
The Black
right?
Spades, for example,
Yeah.
was a predominantly black gang, but they had Puerto Rican members. The Ghetto Brothers was a predominantly Puerto Rican gang, but they had black members. Black Benji, Benjamin Cornell, who in some ways is a martyr for hip hop,
Right.
was the warlord of the Ghetto Brothers, and he was black. Yellow Benji, a Puerto Rican, Benjamin Melendez, was the president of the Ghetto Brothers, but he was Puerto Rican. When Black Benji was murdered in 1971, December, indirectly, I'm not saying that was the direct cause, but indirectly, that created the space for hip hop to grow. Why? Because Yellow Benji called a peace meeting, which is why we put that in the title of the
Right.
book. He called a peace meeting with all the gangs in New York, similar to the movie The Warriors, when Cyrus, the leader of, what was the name of the gang?
I don't remember.
Yeah. Anyway, when Cyrus calls that truce amongst all the gang members, right? That was art imitating life. And it really happened, although it was a Puerto Rican that was responsible for calling that truce. So when that happened, after a couple of years, people meaning the youth, the kids that had speakers and DJ equipment, started throwing these parties because now, or park jams, I should say, because now you could go from one neighborhood to the next and take in a park jam without getting jumped. You see what I'm saying? So these different circumstances that were all put inside of this petri dish grew into what hip hop is. You know what I'm saying? And what I like to say is, for that reason, or for those reasons, urban planning, redlining, the economy in this city, how youth were reacting to their conditions, memos like Benign Neglect. This was a memo that was written in January 1970, courtesy of a guy named Patrick Moynihan. And Patrick Moynihan was an advisor to the then president, Richard Nixon. And in this memo, he basically was saying that he pathologized black people in urban cities like the Bronx, right? And basically, in pathologizing them, he was categorizing them and saying they're abnormal. Like, they set fire to their homes, they sell drugs. A lot of them, the youth come up in single parent homes. So he pathologized these inner city kids. And here's the thing, it's a memo that was talking about the black race, but guess who lived with black people in the Bronx? Puerto Ricans. You see what I'm saying? So you have these different circumstances that created, again, the space for hip hop to grow. There were big populations of black people in the South. There were big populations of black people in Compton, in LA, in the early 70s.
They were redlined too.
I'm sorry?
They were redlined too.
They were redlined. Exactly.
They were redlined in Chicago,
exactly.
But that
here's
was
the thing. Here's the thing.
Go ahead.
And they were redlined too. But why did hip hop start in the Bronx? Do you think it's a coincidence that Puerto Ricans were there in the Bronx? No. So it's like, you proved my point, Goldfinger. You had these different areas of the United States, Chicago, LA, the South, that were redlined with predominantly black people, but hip hop starts in the Bronx. The fact that there were Puerto Ricans there is not a coincidence. And that's my overall point. That's the best way that I can answer this question for you of who's responsible for this culture that we're arguing about now on social media every single day. It isn't a culture that was created by a race. Hip hop is a counterculture. It's a counterculture. It's a movement that happened. It wasn't created. It happened as a response to redlining. And it didn't happen in areas that were redlined that consisted majority or all black people because there weren't other races there. You need other races for hip hop to experience itself. And that's why when you look at the records that hip hop DJs use, bro, Kraftwerk, these are white people from Britain. Tom Sawyer, look at the back cover, bro. A Canadian rock group. ESG, UFO, this is a hip hop anthem. Puerto Rican punk band. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. This is hip hop. This amalgamation, bro. Wasp, Black Sabbath. This is a hip hop anthem. You play this at a hip hop jam, authentic hip hop jam, people are going crazy. Breaking, DJs are cutting it up, the guitars. I mean, this is hip hop. Hip hop isn't a guy with a mic rapping. And that is part of the issue. We're conflating, not me, but on social media, conflating hip hop to an aesthetic of a black dude with skinny jeans sagging with a mic and dreads rapping. That's not hip hop. That's rap music. It's a product of the bigger culture. Hip hop is an amalgamation literally of everything.
And what troubles you the most is that this wasn't a question or a conversation 20 years ago.
Nope.
Or 10 years ago.
Nope.
Or even, I don't know, like 5 or 6 years ago.
It became a conversation when these factions started to get a voice on social media and talk about appropriation, reparations. I feel like the George Floyd incident also had a lot to do with it. Like you said, it sparked, it gave them this, it emboldened them to speak out and talk about, rightly so, what they felt was unjust, right? I get it. I totally get it.
Right.
And I just want to be clear. I'm not here arguing against reparations. That's not my fight. You know what I mean? Like, by all means, if you feel this country owes you money because your lineage dates back to slavery, then good luck to you. I'm just talking about the culture of hip hop. And it's not a coincidence that the DJs that used music to express themselves integrated this and that, not this or that. They didn't say, well, Black Sabbath, white lady in front of a cover. Nah, that's not my culture. Kraftwerk, white dudes, huh? Nah, that's not my culture. I'd rather just play James Brown. DJs weren't doing that. They were taking from they were like, yo, this is dope. What? This is dope. If it sounded good, they used it. They didn't care about lineage or slavery or who played the drums. Was he black or any of that? How does it sound? And in the greater context of hip hop, it doesn't matter where you were born, whether or not you speak Spanish or Japanese, or if you're Jewish, or if you're rich, or if you're poor. At this point where we're at, hip hop is all about how creative are you within the context of the 4 elements.
And it's troubling for you because you would think in the decades you've invested and been surrounded by hip hop, someone would have came to you and questioned and said, you don't belong here.
Exactly.
And
I feel like I'm talking to my therapist right now.
But like, and I think I feel the same way too, because I think even in all the times I've been a part of hip hop and grew up with hip hop, I mean, everyone always was like, yo, what's this Chinese kid doing or whatever. But in the circle of hip hop, it was never in question.
No.
And it was, and for now, this question to come up in the last 4 years since 2020, it's almost become a part of the history of hip hop,
which is sad to me.
Which is getting in your eyes, it's getting rewritten with
It's not. They're attempting to rewrite it, but it will never get rewritten because people like me are too vocal.
But this is, and you also felt this personally because you were getting attacked as well.
Yo, I was online, and I don't necessarily enjoy saying this, but we got to be transparent. I'd get on Twitter and I'd have Black Americans that felt because their lineage can be traced back to slavery calling me filthy immigrant and tether like I tether myself, I attach myself to Black culture. And this is coming from a person that probably discovered hip hop within the last decade. I started out as a breaker in 79. I was a little kid. 1979, I started breaking. 80, 81, I started writing graffiti. 82, 83, I started DJing. 84, 85, 86, 87, 88, 89, 90, 91, 92, 93, 94, 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 2011, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, 2025, bro, non-stop. Never went to jail. So I never took a break because I was incarcerated. Never ended up, cracked out or on drugs. So I had to take a break because I had to get my shit together. I've devoted every ounce of my being to this culture since 1979, bro.
And it saved your life.
And it saved my life.
So
how could you say hip hop doesn't belong to me? How could you call me a tether when I've contributed to the culture? Because of me, there are people all over the world that want to talk about specifically DJ culture. It doesn't make any sense, bro. It doesn't make any sense. But when you think about or factor in the money aspect of it, then it's like, that's what this is about. It's money.
But is that all it's about, you think?
That's all it's about. It has nothing to do with creativity or the culture of it, like the norms and the customs and ways that we all interact as hip hop heads. It has nothing to do with that. You know why? Because the people that will get online and call me a tether or call you an anchor baby never been to a b-boy battle. Mm-hmm. Have you been to a b-boy battle?
Yeah.
I've been to a b-boy battle. Have you been to a breaking battle? This is hip hop. This is hip hop. This, for me, are the people at these tables that have the right to talk about it. Mm-hmm. If you've never been to a b-boy battle, shut the fuck up. Seriously. Like it's really that simple. But I feel, to bring it back real quick, and I'll shut up. When you brought up in 2020 that onslaught of videos from people like A-Track, Bob James, and other DJs basically getting in front of their phone and saying like, yo, I just want to say, like, I know that I'm white and I understand it, like, this is Black culture. That emboldened them. It sort of gave them, these factions, the strength to be like, word, now we could run with this for real. Like, we got them. But
I see another side.
Twitter's not real, bro.
Yeah, I know.
You know that, right?
No, it isn't.
It's not real.
You know what? A lot of them are probably bots. I'm not going to deny that. That's true. But either way, we're talking about it.
Yeah, the conversation has to happen. I mean, it has to, because a lot of the viewpoint of people that talk about hip hop, they're seeing a romanticized version of what hip hop is.
Right.
You know, a lot of people can say, "Oh, well, Wild Style came out in '83 or '82, and this breaking. My first introduction to hip hop was breaking." If we allow that to be the conversation, then we would think that breaking was real.
I don't understand what you're saying.
What I'm saying is that everything that was viewed from the movie, because it's a hip hop movie, doesn't mean there was necessarily accurate hip hop.
Wild Style was accurate as fuck.
No. Wild Style can be viewed as accurate. Breaking wasn't.
The Cali version. I'm gonna let Crooked handle that one. How do you feel about breaking?
I mean, I was a real little kid, so I thought breaking was amazing.
But in the same way that you're saying that Wild Style is real. Wild Style is real, but it didn't give you the exact
it was
participants. It was a lot of people that were left out of the movie.
It was coming from a movie studio. And,
who? Sorry to interrupt you, Crooked. Who was left out of Wild Style that you feel deserved to be in that movie?
There were other DJs besides the DJs that were
Yeah, but there are a gazillion DJs outside of that door. Do they deserve to be at this table?
No, I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is that if you were viewing it for the first time, just as a novice, a person that didn't know, you would think that the only person that was doing the graffiti was Puerto Rican. You would think that, because they are the only ones that's being showed. The ones that are rapping, you would think that the only guys that rap are black. You would think that the only guys that...
I see what you're saying.
You get what I'm saying? So it's how it's viewed to... It doesn't give you the perception of the whole. Right. It gives you their take of it.
That's why you got to read this book and educate yourself and not rely on podcasters. I'm not saying that in an offensive way towards you guys, but there are podcasters out there now that are talking about the culture, and really they're just fans. Like, they're not of the culture. They're fans, and because they have a decked out little studio and they're probably charismatic, they get views and attention, but they're speaking on a culture that they know nothing about. It's a lot of like surface information that they regurgitate, that they just picked up by watching a movie, right? Or reading.
And that's the danger of it. That's the danger of it.
Exactly.
And this is why this conversation is important, because it's like there are new people that are getting into hip hop. They're getting into hip hop, and we don't know what their starting point is. And because you're saying that, because I live it, or I do this, I do that they have some type of claim to hip hop. And that's where I think a lot of the argument from people that were here originally, they say, well, look, this guy's claiming that he's down with hip hop, but I've been here the whole time. My brother used to do hip hop, and he's not able to claim hip hop.
Yeah, but here's the thing: hip hop isn't about whether or not you were alive when it was happening. Hip hop is about, were you down when it was happening?
All right, but that's debatable too. That's debatable too.
It's not debatable, bro. You know why? Because if you had a brother that was in a breaking crew, but you didn't break, sorry, you can't be down in this crew. Go home. Yo, real quick, you used to. Who told me that? One of y'all told me that they used to hang out with Blind.
I did.
All right, Crooked. You used to hang out with Blind, right?
Yeah.
Do you know Blind is black? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Blind is black. He's a black male. When I used to go to Raider's house, rest in peace, Raider. I fucking miss you, bro.
Peace to Rec Radio.
In 1991, I used to go to Raider's house. I was in college at the time. I was in Baruch College. Pack my book bag, read psych books on the train, and I'd also have my records in that bag. Get to Raiders, put my bag down, leave my books in the bag, take the records out, start putting the records on the platters of the turntables. And Raider and I would both look at Blind. Blind was his neighbor, and we would both look at Blind, and then Raider would be like, "Get out." Rob and I got to practice now. Blind is black.
Okay.
But he wasn't down at the time. You see what I'm saying? I'm Colombian. I was down. Raider's black, right? So I'm down because I do this shit. Blind would get kicked out. He would fucking leave. And Blind, many years later, would tell me that he would put his ear, because he was like, I think he was like a floor above Raider or floor below Raider. So he would put his ear to the radiator and listen to us while we were practicing.
Crazy.
Right?
Yeah.
But the thing is that I'm trying to say, being black doesn't arbitrarily make you down with this shit. Is, do you do this? And are you good? That's what makes you a part of this shit. And at the time, as black as Blind was, he wasn't down. So Raider would kick him out of the apartment. And me, a Colombian, who in the eyes of these factions isn't down, and this young black kid, 19 years old, are practicing together. And it didn't matter that my parents were from Colombia. What mattered was, yo, Rob got that new biz routine, and I want to see him do it and learn from him. And Raider got that new routine with Drummer's Beat. He puts the records on 45. Damn, how the fuck does he do this shit? I need to study this dude right now and go home and then figure out a way to add on to what he did. It wasn't, yo, Raider, what is your lineage?
Okay,
yo, Rob,
but
where were you born? We never had these conversations in Raider's project apartment.
A little pushback for that, because somebody that's going to look at that, they're going to be like, well, the sacrifices that my family made as a black person contributed to the fact of the conditions of what was going on. So we have some type of right to say this is that or that is this. If you're if you're the primary person that's being persecuted for the condition that you're in, you kind of have a right or say so. If you've been fighting, or if you have sacrificed from police brutality or bad schools or redlining or this, that, and the third, you kind of have some type of connection to the art form because you're there and you're living it.
Before you answer, Rob, I actually want to bring this back a little bit. I do want to talk about, Goldie, what you're saying, because I think there are people with an agenda for reparations and who want to take advantage of what was going on in 2020 to kind of, to cash out.
Y'all guys talking about this, and this is pretty much news to me.
Yeah. No. So like this was you saw the narrative kind of happening, and it started to evolve, and it's just in 2020. But I do think, Goldie, what you're saying, I do feel like there are a lot of black Americans who don't really feel like America, who's like you were saying, right? America is their country. They don't feel like they are recognized and their contributions are recognized in this country. And is it, I'm asking you, Goldie, too. A lot of them feel like, everything's been stolen from them. And there's like, history has been changed consistently for hundreds of years. There's just all kinds of trauma that's been built up with black Americans. And I think this conversation of hip hop, I think it feels like that's another art form, that's another contribution that's kind of been stolen to a certain degree, Goldie?
Oh, I would definitely say that. But what I will say is that, the other conversations about maybe jazz, we can have the same conversation about jazz.
Right,
and
from
we can
rock
say,
and roll.
We could say, the contributions of Jewish Americans in jazz is insurmountable. And it's true. But is it a black art form? Yes.
I don't agree with that.
So jazz is not a black art form now?
I'm talking about hip hop, not jazz.
Okay. The way that black people would be able to view it as, look, well, they stole rock and roll from us, and rock and roll was black. And rock and roll was black. Jazz was black. What's going on? Now hip hop is next.
And you feel like the lines are being blurred with hip hop.
The lines are definitely being blurred. Hip hop
is not just jazz, though.
I understand that, but I'm just saying you can base the origins of hip hop from jazz. The basis of
the thing is, like,
The
Rob,
source material is coming from black sources.
Rob, you can trace your family to Colombia.
Correct.
We have the privilege of tracing our family. Like I could trace my family to Korea. I think there are Black Americans who, and I'm asking Goldie, who feel like their history is being erased or their contributions are erased to a certain degree.
I can see where that's a conversation for that.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's just like, whether it's, white people or, Latinos or everyone's kind of blurring the lines on what the history of Black Americans are.
Here's the thing, man.
Yeah.
Hip hop, ironically, is the epitome of taking. We're talking about black people feeling like what they own is being taken from them. Whether it's sampling, right? I have records here. All of these records are from a variety of genres, not just jazz. And for me to experience myself as a DJ, beat juggling, let's say, I have to take this record by Bob James, a white jazz pianist, isolate the part that I identify with on a particular song, let's say Take Me to Mardi Gras, and then redefine what the musicians were doing on that part, reinterpret, reinvent how that section, 8-bar section of sound is heard underneath my fingertips. That is what hip hop is. You're literally saying, this I could fuck with, this I could fuck with, that I could fuck with, and you reinterpret it, right? So you filter it through your perception of sound and creativity, and then you bring it forth to people in a different way. But without these different genres, there's no Rob Swift. You can't experience Rob Swift as a DJ. So it's ironic that we're talking about a race feeling like their creation is being stolen when all hip hop does is steal. All we do is take and reinterpret it and give it back, spit it back out to people in a creative way that, it might be different. If I take a section of Take Me to Mardi Gras, beat juggle it, it's not going to sound exactly the way that section would if I let the needle play on its own. But without this record existing, without me being able to go to the record store and buy this record, there's no Rob Swift. So I'm relying on the creativity of other people.
All right. To be fair, Bob James is great. Wasn't in my family's record collection. We did have Curtis Mayfield. We did have James Brown. And the premise of that comes from James Brown's vamps.
Okay.
The 2-bar, 4-bar loop or whatever like that. So this is not in everybody's house. This is a lot later also. This is like 77, 78.
74.
And, all right, so 74. But James Brown was doing that in the 60s. So the ideas were already there.
Right. So let me ask you this. In the movie Wild Style, we were talking about Wild Style earlier. I think you brought it up, Goldfinger. Remember the kitchen scene?
Oh yeah, he's definitely doing James. He's doing Bob James, but he's cutting
Bob James.
Right, but
so it's not. My point is, it's not just James Brown. It's James Brown and Bob James.
Okay,
it's Aretha Franklin and ESG. It's whatever black rock band and Black Sabbath.
Okay.
It's this and that. Not this or that. No, it was that all in the 70s, bro. It was that all in the 70s.
Eventually, but you had the source material and the premise was before the 70s.
Yeah, so you're talking about.
Hold on. You're saying. Let me see if I understand. You're saying that the source material for hip hop music, not the other elements, the DJ element, comes from the 60s?
Comes before the 60s.
You're talking about like down south with blues.
I'm talking about whatever the beat had that type of flavor, whether it be Pigmeat Markham or whether it be, that's way before the 70s, my brother.
Goldfinger, do you know that Pigmeat Markham moved from North Carolina to the Bronx?
Okay. But it's still.
But do you know
this? Still predates the 70s, my brother.
But I'm trying to get an answer from you.
God.
Did you know that Pigmeat Markham moved from North Carolina to the Bronx?
Okay, I'll give you that. But I also realized that he was in North Carolina as well.
Do you think it's a coincidence that he lived in the Bronx?
All right, do you
and
think
he's rapping over this. It can't be a coincidence, bro.
No, check this out. Do you believe that because he lived in North Carolina, that some people like goes down to North Carolina for summer vacation and they trade off ideas and maybe
you think a Puerto Rican went to North Carolina for vacation?
I can't speak for Puerto Ricans. I can't speak for Puerto Ricans, brother.
Nah, I mean, if you critically think and just look at the information and just make sense. If you look at the information and just make sense out of it,
the Pigmeat Markham record was way before the 70s, though, brother.
Right. It came out in 69.
All right, so this 1969. So my family couldn't have sent me down to North Carolina and they were like, this is what we're doing out here?
You think somebody told him about rap? And he was like, okay, I'm going to rap on this. No, he did it when he was in the Bronx, bro.
All right, so James Brown, when did he come to the Bronx? Because he was rapping on his records?
Well, James Brown is no doubt a huge part of hip-hop culture.
Isaac Hayes,
no doubt. You can't deny that.
So why is it so formulated it has to be the Bronx, but everybody else in different places is doing it?
It's the Bronx because in the Bronx you had black families that had, I don't know, maybe the Isaac Hayes song, and then Puerto Rican families that had the ESG song.
But that's we're talking about the 60s, though. We're talking about the 60s.
But what I'm saying is, I'm asking you a question. What I'm saying is, it's the Bronx because this was the area of New York where you had the meshing of these different styles, these different genres of music. Why? Because it was diverse. You had Latinos, majority Puerto Rican, and blacks living together. Otherwise, hip hop would have been created in South Carolina or Compton, California, or some other diasporic African or Black American region of the United States. It happened. It could only have happened in the Bronx because of the diversity.
I think you guys also we're forgetting to mention the technology, right? Mm-hmm. And the aspect of the blackouts and like the looting.
No doubt.
But that's way later though.
No,
people
but
I'm saying
it's a part of
people
it.
Were DJing.
I know.
People were DJing and people were playing those records before even Flash, because you got to remember, respectfully, Grandmaster Flash came out 67, 76, 77, but they were already a Grandmaster in Brooklyn. And
Grandmaster Flowers,
Grandmaster Flowers, who lived a couple of projects away from me.
But I think what Goldfinger is struggling to understand is that playing a song on a turntable does not make it hip-hop.
Even if you're playing the hip-hop music, even if you're playing this record, because I didn't rub on the record.
Moody by ESG is not a hip-hop song.
I know it's not.
What makes it hip-hop is the minute I do this. That's what makes it hip-hop.
But ESG is on the other side.
Right. Either way. My point is...
You have UFO on the other side, so that's not hip-hop? If I just play that record, that's not hip-hop?
Hip-hop DJing is not taking a needle and placing the needle on the record and then letting it play.
It's not taste-making?
That's not what hip-hop DJing is. Hip-hop is what you do to the record.
All right, so your argument. So I'm gonna shoot up.
Can I just finish my point real quick?
Do your thing.
Hip-hop is being resourceful enough to say, I'm not gonna let the platter turn on its own as the needle is skating on this piece of vinyl. Hip-hop DJing, what makes it hip-hop is saying, I'm going to take my hand and coax a sound out of this record. Now it's a hip-hop song. The minute I put it down, it goes back to the genre that it is. In the case of ESG, they're a punk band. that happens to be Puerto Rican. So if I give this record to Bianca, it's a punk record. You give this record to me, it's a hip hop record because of what I do to it. That's what people are not understanding. Flowers was a disco DJ. He was not a hip hop DJ. Grandmaster Flash was a hip hop DJ because what he did, his concepts of the clock theory, the quick mix theory, buying doubles of records and catching or looping a break part of a record, that's what makes it hip hop. You filter a source through your creative mind, the way you perceive or what you could perceive can be done on this record, and then it becomes hip hop. Hip hop, another way of saying it, is action. It's action. You can't, in my opinion, put a label on something. So this, for example, Eric B. and Rakim, Paid in Full album. This is rap music. This is a product of hip hop culture or hip hop mindset. This is a product. This is what you go to the store and you pay whatever this costs, $6.99 back when I bought it at the Wiz, right? So you pay money for this product and it's rap, right? And there's a cover, there's a sleeve. But hip hop, I'm sorry to get esoteric on you guys, but hip hop to me is creativity in action. So once it's done, that's it. You don't have hip hop anymore. You understand? This hip hop, what we would consider a hip hop album, is the product of the creativity. So when they were in the studio and Eric B was recording his scratches, Rakim was spitting his rhymes, that action, that to me is what hip hop is. It's not, this is a product. This is rap music through my eyes. You know what I'm saying? And so you're saying, Goldfinger, yeah, but what about James Brown and all the jazz and blues that came out? Yeah, but it's hip hop if I take that jazz or blues song and start scratching it. Then it's hip hop.
No,
but if you just let a needle skate across a record, it's a blues album or a rock album or a jazz album.
All right. So my thing is, first, you're saying that Kool Herc predated Flash, right?
Definitely.
And Kool Herc is hip hop.
Yeah.
So
is hip-hop.
so Kool Herc playing a record of playing Dennis Coffey or whatever like that isn't hip hop, is what you're saying?
Kool Herc became a hip hop DJ when he started experimenting with his merry-go-round concept of catching breaks, right, through a series of records.
Okay, so
for the b-boys to dance to. That synergy, again, action. That synergy that was that was taking place between he on the turntables playing different breaks and the b-boys breaking is hip hop action.
All right, so who's to say that Flowers wasn't doing that? Because
what do you mean? Who's to say? Flowers was a disco DJ. He wasn't playing for b-boys.
So he never played for any of these joints.
He never scratched.
I look.
I think that's semantics.
It's not semantics.
If
Flowers
playing,
is not known as being a scratch DJ. He didn't create any of these techniques.
But known as and credit for and not getting credit for is two different things. You know what I mean?
So can you empirically tell me and point to evidence that Grandmaster Flowers was catching breaks or scratching or backspinning or doing anything that we attribute a hip hop DJ to doing?
Well, these records
on any record.
I know that he played these records at the Park Jam.
Playing a song, Bianca could do.
Okay.
Doing a transformer, Bianca cannot do. And that's what separates Bianca being a DJ and me from being a hip hop DJ.
So Kool Herc technically can be a DJ because he can't do it for a transformer.
Kool Herc created his merry-go-round concept. So in catching breaks, that is a part of the lexicon of what the vocabulary is that entails buying duplicate copies of Bob James 2, isolating the break part, looping it so that the b-boys can break. Remember, I'm saying hip-hop is action. It's not, as a DJ, it's not letting needle skate across a record and just walking away from the turntable and listening to the music. Anybody can do that. My dad did that. He wasn't a hip hop DJ. My dad was a DJ. My brother was a hip hop DJ because he took my dad's equipment and manipulated it. He scratched on the records that my dad asked us to go buy for him that he would end up playing at these parties. My dad let the records play from beginning to end. My brother was isolating the break parts on these disco records and backspinning, scratching, then putting my hand on the record and being like, Rob, look what you could do with this record if you move it back and forth. That is what makes it hip hop.
Goldie, I also think it's the intention, right?
Right.
It's I think what Rob is trying to say is that gathering, who would want to hear 8 to 10 minutes of the same breakbeat going on and
gathering on? For flowers, you're saying?
No, I'm saying, you're saying a hip hop function or a block party where there's all these elements together, where a DJ would be playing a breakbeat for 6 to 8 minutes. Whereas in a disco or a club or a party, they wouldn't necessarily want to hear one section of a record for 6 to 8 minutes repeated unless there was a rapper and breakdancers dancing to this beat.
But real quick, just to interject, at a disco where Flowers was playing, it's not maybe they wouldn't want to hear it. Hell fucking no, they didn't want. Right. They wouldn't want to hear you. But they would at a disco. They were dressed up. They wanted to just dance.
Just so we can set the record straight. Yeah. Flowers did block parties. He did everywhere.
Okay.
Flowers did that, and like I said, he predated Grandmaster Flash. So let's get that together.
No, and all due respect, I feel like you're right, and I feel like both of y'all are right. I just feel like there's a blurred line. There's a blurred area where I would say the gathering of all these kids, all these kids having this equipment, from the blackouts and looting, getting speakers, having the ability of creating a crew of like, well, I got these speakers and you got these turntables, I got a mixer, who has the records?
Right.
And it's all these people coming together. It's the breakdancers. It's the rappers who were like showing out for the DJs and then all of a sudden becoming rappers.
So you're saying that you didn't see none of this in Queens? Because it was happening in Queens.
None of this? What?
Corona. They had jams out there. They had, people with equipment.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a product of that.
Right, but I'm saying, so you didn't see it in Queens at all? Or you weren't?
Did I see what exactly?
Like hip hop in its essence, like block parties and stuff.
Yes, but I think you and I have different definitions of what the essence of hip hop is, because my dad played parties again. No, I'm
not talking about your dad. I'm talking about actual other people, like Disco Twins and people
Yeah, one of the twins works out at my gym.
I think it all comes together. I think it's all an evolution, and one thing affects the other.
Right. Over time, the techniques evolved to what we know to be DJing, breaking, rapping. Remember, I referenced earlier Danny Kaye, the comedian, rapping in a movie, making words rhyme. It's an evolution that took place over time, and you can't attribute it to just one single person or one single race. Hip hop is an amalgamation of everything. It takes this and that. It doesn't say this or that. It embraces everything. It's like, yo, I'm gonna use this and this and this and this, and then we'll see what we come up with. That's what hip hop does. With regards to breaking, capoeira, kaduna, cavorting, seeing someone in a movie, in a black and white film doing a head spin, seeing a Korean in a martial arts film do windmills or helicopter moves, or seeing James Brown do a helicopter move. Hip hop is an amalgamation of everything. It doesn't isolate, it doesn't segregate, it integrates. It says, let me take from here and from there and from there, and then see what I could come up with. So it's not just the black experience, it's also the Puerto Rican experience. It's also the experience of going to the 40 Deuce in the 70s and watching a kung fu flick, Five Deadly Venoms, and then seeing Scorpion do some crazy move on the floor and thinking, yo, I'm gonna add that to this move that I came up with. or I want to come up with. It's incorporating literally everything. It doesn't segregate. And that's the problem that I have with this argument that I'm seeing with regards to hip hop being black culture. How can it be black culture when it literally steals from every culture?
I think it is black culture, but I think it is definitely. I agree with Goldie too, because the roots of it, the bulk of the contributions and the influence and the impact comes from black music and black artists and black American black culture.
I've been DJing for so long. I just don't see.
No, but yeah. I think like during the 70s when hip hop was emerging, I think you are right, Rob. Where like the gathering of the culture itself, not just the music. The culture itself of these black immigrants, Caribbeans, West Indians, Latinos, all of that together molded what we see as hip hop now.
I'm very forward in how I talk, right?
Yeah.
And I don't mean to be disrespectful or dismissive of black culture.
Yeah.
But
I think the way you were brought up is very unique. I think your situation is very unique. I've never.
That's a great point.
Look, my thing is where I grew up, I had a pocket of Puerto Rican people that I grew up with. There was an Italian neighborhood next door. So that's all I knew. You said that you grew up with this person, with that person. That's very unique to New York.
Exactly.
There's only a pocket of those neighborhoods in New York.
Exactly.
It's not commonplace everywhere.
Exactly.
So for you to have that view, what makes you Rob Swift?
It's what makes hip hop hip hop.
I get it, but that's not how everything was going down everywhere else.
Because you had a different Brooklyn experience.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
But we're talking about the Bronx.
No, we're talking about the Bronx, but we also talking about parts of the Bronx as well.
Yeah, but hip hop started in areas of the Bronx that were integrated, where it wasn't just black people. And one thing I want to say real quick is I'm not trying to be dismissive of black culture. Of course I'm not. Actually, this is probably gonna make a lot of people laugh, but I consider myself black. Yo, if there was an APB out on a black male with a black hoodie and a baseball cap outside of this building, and I walk out, you don't think I'm getting stopped?
All right, but
right? Of course I'm getting stopped. So my thing is this: what makes hip hop special is it's an amorphous culture. There's no real way you could box it into any category. It's everything.
All right.
It's not one thing.
Another thing, the way that you described yourself and you said that you haven't been in jail, you haven't done this, whatever like that. Let's just stop equating blackness with I'm going outside and I'm going to get locked up.
I didn't want to come on.
No. I'm just saying it happens a lot in a lot of conversations.
Right, but the reason I bring that up is because I'll be honest with you, I'm ticked off by some of the hip hop heads that were around in the early years, right? The formative years of this culture happening. And look, my brother was into all kind of crazy shit, dude. My brother he was a stick-up kid on top of being a hip hop head. He used to rob people. My brother did some crazy shit. And a lot of his friends did crazy shit. And thankfully, my brother didn't end up in jail or on drugs or anything like that. But the truth of the matter is, because of the way we grew up, the environment that we came up in the inner city, a lot of people fell victim to that shit. And a lot of those people were the first generation people involved in hip hop, whether they were breakers. Batch, again, the inventor of the 3-step did a bid. So there was a big period of time, and he was Puerto Rican. There was a big chunk of time where he wasn't involved in hip hop. So and I'm not saying Batch has said anything, out of turn regarding like generations that came after him, but there, all of a sudden, people coming out of their caves that, whether they were locked up or on drugs or whatever the case is, now saying, I'm not saying a lot, but some talking about, I was there in the beginning. Who are you? And it's like, bro, I've been doing this since 1979. Who are you to tell me? You can't pull rank on me. I've been doing this way longer and nonstop every single day. And that's why I say that. But I'm not saying that someone ending up in jail or on drugs or going through the struggle, I'm not saying that's specific to black people. Because again, I had a brother that was crazy, and thank God he cleaned up his act. And that's why I went the route that I did with my music and going to school and all that, because I didn't want to end up like a lot of my friends. I was in a b-boy crew, myself, Colombian, my boy Little Ram, Puerto Rican, my boy Nay, Joey, Puerto Rican, my boy David, Puerto Rican, and we had a white kid down with us called White Boy Billy. So it was a Colombian, Nay, Joey, David, 3 Puerto Ricans, and a white boy. David ended up going to jail. You know what I'm saying? So that shit was around me. And the reason I say that is to say that can't nobody, I don't give a fuck if you're a first generation breaker, first generation DJ, rapper, graph writer. I don't care if you identify with any of these factions now that are claiming hip hop is theirs. I'm not a tether. I'm not an anchor baby. And I've been doing this shit long enough to feel like I have the right to say I have a stake in this. You know what I'm saying? That's why I said what I said earlier.
Gotcha.
That's literally why you wrote this book. You felt the need to clarify exactly what was going on because you felt like history was getting rewritten a little bit. And
especially by people that have no connection to the culture.
Yeah. And then you partnered up with Rasul, right?
Yes, Rasul Moat. Big shout out to Rasul Moat, who's a professor at NC State. I started writing the book in March of 2023. And then halfway, I remember just looking at all my notes and thinking, is this right? Like, am I following the proper protocol? And I reached out to Rasul and I was like, bro, help me finish this. And he did.
You took it very personal that you were like, well, let me go into the history and figure this out. Maybe I'm wrong. Did you kind of question it a little bit? Or you were like, no, like, I know the history. This is completely...
And do you have sources in the book?
I have so many sources in the book. Photographers like Joe Conzo, who we credit as being
first
hip hop's
first photographer.
Yeah, first photographer.
That's debatable.
Man, it could be, but he's definitely was.
He was there.
He was there. Documenting.
Because you have Shabazz, you have Shabazz.
Yeah, Jamel Shabazz. We have pictures of Jamel Shabazz in the book as well. Right. So we have
Ernie.
We have Ernie, who's isn't he native?
Yes, he is native.
Right. So look at that. A Puerto Rican in Joe Conzo, a Native American in Ernie, and a Black American in Jamel Shabazz, documenting hip hop. I mean, I could leave right now. That pretty much sums up what this book is arguing. And I appreciate what you just said, that like I took it personal. I did, so much so that I sat, dude, for a year and wrote a fucking book.
Right.
That's how personal I took the shit, because I've been doing this for so long. So when I would jump on Twitter and see a tweet by someone that was off-putting, and then I'm trying to correct the narrative, and then there's like 20, 30 people
log off,
attacking people.
Log off.
I hear you.
Twitter is not a real
space. But here's the thing. When there's 10, 20, 30 people attacking me, you can log off. But then when you log off, you're letting a lie become the truth.
Right.
And I mean, again, I've been doing this for too long. I've been doing this for the majority of my life. There's no way that I'm going to let a faction co-opt a culture that's mine. Yo, bro, hip hop is like a puzzle, right? And each piece to the puzzle is different sizes, it's different shapes. And for that puzzle to make a uniform picture, you need each piece to be different. And each piece has its value. I don't care how small or how big the piece is. So if you take a few pieces out of that uniform picture. You might still have a general picture, but there's going to be some missing
Elements,
shapes.
right.
You know what I'm saying? And so when someone's on Twitter coming at me like, yo, you're irrelevant, who are you? Who am I? I'm irrelevant. What? Nah, I gotta definitely put this all in writing more than anything, so that when my students engage with someone like that, they are armed with truth and facts, and they could defend themselves. You know what I mean? And not just rhetoric, right? Facts. And this is what the book is definitely immersed in: facts, not rhetoric, not bullshit, not, talking points, and this language that has been created now by these factions to isolate people and marginalize people. Because to me, that's the antithesis of what hip hop is.
In your Brolic Army DJ school, did you have students that were speaking to you about this?
Yeah.
That integrated with you? Because I feel like, besides Twitter, when you personally engage with somebody and you hear this misinformation, that's got to be
disinformation, man.
Yeah, disinformation. Then that must have been even more triggering. That must have been even more heartbreaking.
It is. Heartbreaking is a perfect word, because again, I've given my heart and soul to this art form since 1979, bro. So I would have students that would DM me links to like these forums of people saying crazy shit like, yo, if you're white, you don't belong in our culture, you're a colonizer. And it's like, bro, I could think of so many dope white graffiti artists that contributed to the element of hip hop that is graffiti. Again, Zephyr, Tracy 168, I could go on and on. I could think of white b-boys like Mr. Freeze. That dude in the 70s, that dude was hip hop royalty in the late 70s and early 80s. Walk up into any hip hop park jam, I don't care if it's predominantly black, Puerto Rican, he's getting a pass, and he's white. I could think of white DJs, bro, dope ones. Exotic E, rest in peace, from Miami, who was in X-Men. A crew of DJs that were black and brown, and he was the only white member. You know what I'm saying? So to your point, Goldfinger, maybe my perspective is unique because I was around such diversity, right? But that's
not a bad thing.
And it's not a bad thing.
I was going to say,
not at all. I was going to say, but because my perspective is so diverse, does that disqualify me from being hip hop? You know what I'm saying?
But you also have to understand that is not everybody's, experience. It's not.
No, it's true.
And a lot of the Bronx, it's not. A lot of the Brooklyn, it's not. Even a lot of part of Queens, there's not too many neighborhoods like Jackson Heights. There's not too many places like Corona. You know what I mean?
1,000%.
It's funny as even as as close as New York is, there's still these small pockets of experiences.
Yeah.
And they're all valid.
Right.
And they're all valid. One isn't more important than the other.
Exactly.
And to be honest, it's like this all kind of makes sense, even with one of the first beefs in hip hop, with where did hip hop start? The Bronx with KRS Boogie Down against MC Shan. So this is kind of it's always kind of,
and that was debatable.
Yeah, that was debatable.
Well, Shan, for the record, being that I'm from Queens, right? Let's just get the record straight. In the bridge, he never said hip hop started in Queens.
Also, the places that KRS was describing wasn't actually the South Bronx. It was the West Bronx.
It was the West Bronx.
It was the West Bronx. Yep. So you have little inaccuracies, little romanticisms and stuff of that nature. The great part about it is if we're all passionate as Rob Swift is about hip hop, then hip hop would be a better place. It would be a better situation.
That's the quote of the day.
Yeah.
That's the quote of the day.
Thanks for listening to the R.O.A.D podcast. This is the end of part 1 of a 2-part interview with Rob Swift. Stay tuned till next week for the second half to be released. And until then, you could follow us on socials at R.O.A.D Podcasts, check out our Patreon, and subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts.
If you want to watch more episodes from R.O.A.D Podcast, click either links on the left or the right. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube page and get updated on new uploads throughout the week. Peace.